The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of ParaX, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
All these voices. All these voices. All these things you can't explain. All these painful memories. They keep haunting you and daunting me. It's just the ghost of you and me. It's just the smoke and gasoline. It's just the ghost of you and me. Of you and me.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Staring into the Abyss. I am your host, horror author James Hershey Jr. And with me as always, my co-host, old boy James Ash. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing pretty good. How's everybody tonight?
Tonight's show is going to be cool, man. It's going to be a lot of fun. We are going to be talking about and giving you some evidence of another one of these mythical creatures that we've all read about, seen movies about, all that kind of stuff, that turns out very well could have actually existed. And I think that archaeologists have found it. So without further ado, we're going to go on to the article tonight. Today's article comes from Zaluan, and the headline is "A Dwarf Race with Elongated Skulls Discovered Inside Ancient Temple in Malta." It was published September 22nd, 2021. Remains of an enigmatic race with elongated skulls and a short stature were unearthed inside a 5,000-year-old archaeological site in Malta. As we step further into the world of archaeology, we come across details that little by little complete this intricate puzzle posed by our ancient history. Scientists keep making discoveries that tie various regions on the globe over periods of time that in the future may form an ensemble picture. One special and intricate case is represented by the Hypogeum of Hal Saflieni, a subterranean site dating from somewhere around 3300 to 3000 BC. It proved to be a necropolis after the remains of over 7,000 bodies, with elongated skulls, were uncovered. Bones unlike any ancestor on the evolutionary scale. The discovery had happened in 1902. While the workers on a construction site broke through the roof by chance. Like many other major discoveries, it happened as a result of an accident, and fortunately for us, the attempts to cover up the underground megalithic structure had all failed. Manuel Magri led the excavations. He was a pioneer of archaeology and a Jesuit priest, member of the Society of Jesus. Under suspicious circumstances, the priest died just before the publication of the excavations report in 1907. The official report described the megalithic tomb as a massive catacomb on 3 levels, sculpted in more than 2,000 tons of rock. Its walls were ornate with various geometrical figures such as spirals, pentagons, and floral themes, or animal drawings. In support of this discovery stands an extract published by the National Geographic magazine in the 1920s, describing the first inhabitants of Malta as a race with elongated skulls. From an examination of the skeletons of the polished Stone Age, it appears that the early inhabitants of Malta were a race of long-skulled people of low to medium height, akin to the early people of Egypt, who spread westward along the north coast of Africa, whence some went to Malta and Sicily, and others to Sardinia and Spain. National Geographic Magazine, January to June, 1920. Volume 37. The Hal Saflieni site links to numerous chambers, some serving as tombs, others as sanctuaries. The first layer is 10 meters below the surface and consists of natural caves that later were extended artificially. The second layer reveals the main chamber forking into other chambers. Statues such as the intriguing sleeping lady were dug up in the first room. On the same level, it's the unique oracle room, exiting to the decorated room characterized by smooth walls and elaborate pattern of spirals. In the same room on the right side of the entrance wall sits a human hand carved into a stone. Next on the excavation report is a 2-meter pit with a purpose that can only be speculated. Pit snake or alms collecting. Last, a special room called the Holy of Holies contained 3 vertical stone structures known as trilithons, which were framed within each other. No bones were found on the 3rd floor or any signs of human remains, so it is believed that the room was used to deposit grains, water, and various sustenance items. Among all these chambers, the oracle chamber imposes itself through its remarkable features, a perfectly acoustic enhancement design with astonishing vocal resonance. It is believed that its quality helped propagate and amplify the ritual chanting. The vibration produced inside this chamber created a unique effect in transposing the emotional spectrum, nowhere on this planet having been recorded such a reaction. This is also the visually richest room in the entire site, with complex red ochre spirals ornate with circular blobs. After a meticulous analysis, researchers established that 5,000 years ago, the inhabitants of this place were a short race with elongated skulls, anomalies which are not present in our human ancestors, at least not those that we've learned of. This intriguing fact points to a hypothesis which involves an extraterrestrial race that had once lived on the present territory of Malta, Paola. For a short span of time, the skulls were displayed in the Archaeologic Museum of Valletta, until mysteriously disappearing without a trace. The only evidence of this millennial discovery is represented by a few pictures, which prove the bizarre find from Malta's Hal Saflieni is more than just a local legend or a fable. Whatever happened to the skulls, we can only guess, but rumor has it the government tailed it into the matter because of the extreme importance the skull posed. Apparently, we are not allowed to learn our true history because of the contradicting truths we might find. And that is the end of the article. Now, I want to show you a couple photographs. This first photograph shows the site. This is where the skulls were discovered. This is the archaeological dig that the article was talking about. So you can kind of get a visual of what it looked like. The second photograph that I would like to show you is actually the article from National Geographic that they referenced in this article. Now, you can see here the headline is "The Mystery of Malta's Long-Headed Skulls." And it actually shows a photograph of one of these skulls, which is crazy looking. It says, the editor of Hera, Italy's magazine of ancient mysteries, unravels one of the world's strangest puzzles. Long ago in the megalithic temple of Hal Saflieni, it's so small it's hard to read, were buried men with extraordinary cranial volume. Their skulls seem to observers today to belong to a truly alien stock. If properly understood, could these skulls provide a link between the ancient Mesopotamian and Egyptian cultures and a race of priestly men identified with the serpent? Okay, I'm not going to try to read the rest of this because, like I said, it is very, very small and it's very difficult for me to read it. But anyway, there's the actual article in National Geographic that shows that this actually took place, that it happened. That this isn't BS. These skulls were found. This was an actual dig. And there you have it. Okay, so there's a lot to unpack here. First of all, there was multiple different theories that were thrown out in this article. The first was that this was an alien species that lived on Earth. And the second, and I think the more likely, is that this was an early hominid species. Now, what I think it is, my answer to this would be that this was an early hominid species, just like Homo sapiens. We had Homo erectus, we had Neanderthal, we had all kinds of different ones. Gigantopithecus was a hominoid species, but it was a lot different than us. We had Homo florensis, we had a bunch of different ones. But what's cool about this is I believe that this is where the legends of the dwarfs came from. because all kinds of folklore all over the world have legends and stories about dwarves. And I think that this is where they get it from. That there were actually people that existed that were dwarves, that looked exactly like the dwarfs of legends. And they found them. In the article, they went through and showed the National Geographic article, and I read some of that to you, that provides a photograph of these skulls. So you can actually see for yourself what these things look like. If you're listening on the radio right now, go to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/James Hershey Jr. The video will be there, and you'll be able to look at it yourself and see the actual photograph on the screen of these skulls. Now, having skulls that are elongated or stretched is not unheard of. That was done quite a bit, actually, throughout time in different cultures. They would strap like boards to the head when they were real young and tighten them in order to stretch and elongate the skull. Is that what happened here? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know, because these were stretched a lot bigger and a lot more than anything I've ever seen before. So it could be a combination of genetically them being that way, to where the skulls are elongated and bigger, and also some stretching that went on with that. Who knows? But I think that this proves the existence of dwarfs at one time on planet Earth. And it's kind of fun and crazy, because the more you research and the more you learn, the more you begin to realize that a lot of these amazing tales that we love so much, coming from people like Tolkien, with the whole Hobbit series and Lord of the Rings, and coming from like Dragonlance and all of those amazing books, where you have all of these dwarfs and elves and hobbits and kinders and gnomes and ogres and trolls and giants and all these things. And we grew up on this, looking at it as this amazing bit of fiction, these amazing stories that for many of us meant a great deal, and we just loved them so much. But now we realize, as we learn more and more and more, that a lot of these things actually did exist. And I'll go through the list for you if you would like. I mean, I know that's a big statement to make. And I know there's going to be people listening that are going to say, get the hell out of here, dude. You're crazy. Okay, I got you. I hear you. But let me go through it for you. Giants. We know existed. Genesis 6 talks about giants. There are photographs of giant skeletons. There are countless newspaper articles about giant skeletons coming from the Wild Western times, when we were expanding across the United States towards the Pacific Ocean. They were finding all these giant burial grounds, and they were like these big hills that they would dig into, and they would find skeletons of giants that were 12, 15 feet big. Very, very large. Countless have been found and documented. We have covered this on many different episodes of Staring into the Abyss about giants. We've went over some of the articles where they actually show photographs of the giants, and there's a newspaper article written about it, and these are in reputable papers. This isn't something we found on Facebook. This is an actual newspaper of the time period that had an actual story about giant bones being found. So we know they existed. 100% they existed. Hobbits, 100% existed. The scientific name for the hobbit is Homo florensis. It was an early hominoid species that matched the description of the hobbits in folklore to a T. So we know they existed. We have the bones. We know they are there. So hobbits existed. Dwarfs. I just read the article to you. There was a hominoid species on Earth at one time that matched the description of a dwarf. So we know dwarfs existed. If you want to get strictly into like the Bible and the Book of Enoch and other religious texts and folklore, a lot of those half-breed kind of creatures we know existed too. And I'm speaking of things like minotaurs and centaurs and like half man, half something else kind of creatures. Because they're talked about in the Bible, they're talked about in a lot of different things. We know, if we follow the story of Genesis 6 down through the book of Enoch, we know that the fallen angels not only mated with human women, but they also mated with all kinds of different animals and produced all kinds of weird offspring. The offspring produced between the mating of the fallen angel and the human woman were giants. The offspring produced with animals were half man, half animal creatures. And that comes straight from the book of Enoch, and it comes straight from folklore all over the world. And the Bible touches on it as well. The Bible talks about unicorns being real. And there are unicorns in almost every folklore of the world. So that would tell me that unicorns actually existed on Earth at one time. Every single culture on Earth have legends of dragons. We have found tons of dinosaur bones. So the idea of a giant flying creature, like a dinosaur-looking creature, is not out of the realm of possibility. I would submit to you that if every single culture on Earth has tales about dragons, that should tell you something. That most likely they existed. I'm sure that you could find in multiple different folklores around the world tales of fairies. And when I mean fairies, I mean like the little Tinkerbell kind of looking fairy. I don't mean the fae overall. Although you can find many, many tales of different types of fae throughout the folklore of the world. You have the story of leprechauns coming out of Ireland, Scotland area. You have the story of little gnomes coming out of the Germanic areas. You have the stories of all kinds of different worker elves that would repair shoes and do all kinds of menial tasks. And the folklores of many different countries are just rich with all of these tales. That all has to be based on something. We have actual scientific proof of several of these things that I've talked about. And then we have overwhelming amounts of folklore documenting others. And I believe that that means something. I believe that that means that these creatures very well could have existed on Earth. So this is a really groundbreaking and really eventful discovery, in my opinion. Now, this discovery wasn't recently made. It was made a while ago. Many, many, many years ago. In 1902, I believe the article said, was the first dig there. But this is one of those things that not a lot of people have ever even heard of. And I always find it funny that when we do one of these shows, you always have the skeptics. You always have the people that dismiss what we say and laugh about it as if it's silly when they don't actually look into it at all to find out for themselves whether they should believe it or not. I mean, here we have reputable scientists. We have archaeologists that did this dig and found these skeletons. We have National Geographic who wrote an article about it and covered it. We have photographs of the skulls. We know 100% that they existed. Now, the other thing I'd like to talk about is the fact that they don't know where the hell they are. Because once again, like with many, many things, they disappeared. And that is something that happens actually quite a bit when you're dealing with archaeology and throughout time with these cool discoveries, is people will have private collections and they will steal these artifacts and sell them to people who collect them. And they are kept hidden in a private collection somewhere. And the field of archaeology has lost a lot of really, really cool stuff. A lot of really cool treasures have just kind of disappeared in time. And I bet you that they're sitting somewhere in a private collection. And I think it's sad, because if we had these specimens still, then we could really do some modern testing on it, some DNA testing, and we could find out for sure exactly what these things were. Because one of the theories, remember, was that this could have been an alien species that came to Earth and lived among us. Now, I don't know how much stock I put in that. I'm not saying it's impossible, because that's certainly a feasible thing to have happen, is for aliens to be here and live among us. I think that is 100% true. I think that that is something that is happening right now. Were these particular specimens alien in origin, or were they an early hominid species that was different than Homo sapien? I tend to think that it was probably a different hominid species, but it was something that is native to Earth. Because during that time period, man, we had all kinds of weird and wacky human species out there. I mentioned some of them earlier. I mean, Gigantopithecus is what I believe Bigfoot is. That was a very, very large 12, 13 foot hominoid species that was hairy as hell, but still intelligent. So, Bigfoot, essentially. You had Homo erectus, which came before. You had Neanderthal, which was here at the same time. You had Homo floresiensis, which I mentioned earlier, which was the hobbit. There were a lot of different ones that were like us but weren't us. And I think that this is just another one of those. But I think what makes this interesting to me, and what makes it worthy of being on the show, is I believe that this didn't happen in a vacuum. These people existed. And they would have been known to early Homo sapiens if they existed at the same time, which I believe they did. So with that being said, with us being in the same area together, there would have been some interaction. We would have known they were there. And we would have passed that information down in the form of stories and songs and stuff like that, which is how early history got passed forward, because there was no method of writing or anything like that at that time. So those stories would have been passed from generation to generation to generation, and narratives would have evolved around those stories to where they became folklore. And then in some people's minds, because they had never seen these things, they began to become fiction. But in reality, that nugget of truth was there that it was based on, and that was an actual living species, hominoid species that was on the earth with us. And I think that's the origin point of the dwarf folklore and legend. Just as Homo floresiensis very well could have been the origin point of the legends and folklore surrounding hobbits. To me, that's really, really cool. And it's really interesting. I love to dig deep into these things and find the origin points of a lot of these creatures and figure out where those legends came from. Because almost every one of the legends are based on some real thing. Now, it might have been like the game of telephone in elementary school, where it gets twisted and exaggerated and stuff gets added to it as it passes down through the generations. but there was a nugget of truth that all of these were based on. And they just got exaggerated throughout time. And I think that this is that origin point for dwarves. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw over to Old Boy, and I'm going to get his opinion on all this, and anything else that he wants to talk about. So Old Boy, go ahead, brother.
Do I believe this could be? It could be a possibility. I don't 100% think it could be. There's a chance. I'd say it's probably about 50-60% chance. I also think that it could be something else. I also could, but I don't know if it's feasible. I think it's about a 10-15% chance. Think it could be alien, but there's more of a possibility of the dwarf thing, like he was saying. I think that's, and I think this might be the origins, but I also think that, like James said, I believe they exist at one time. I don't know if they're around still. I believe, like the Hobbit movies, I think there's some truth to the Hobbit movies, the Lord of the Rings, about these things took off. Elves, we already know giants existed. That is real. Ogres, what else is there? There's plenty of fairies, all kinds of stuff, especially goblins. I'm just thinking of the Lord of the Rings universe. Trolls, all kinds of monsters, and weird creatures, and humanoids, and humans, the hobbits, and dragons, and dragons we already know probably existed in some way or some form. Maybe not exactly like you see, but there's some truth to the dragons. There's some truth to the hobbits. They have found the bones of the hobbits, and we already know humans existed. So goblins, I don't know. That might be a possibility. I'm not going to say impossible. Trolls, I don't know about that. Maybe it was like you said, a mutated giant or inbred giant. You never know. He was talking about Enoch and stuff like that. Could have been different, like Cyclops and all these weird looking monsters could have been running around. That could be what they were. I don't know if you guys are familiar. Everybody knows about the Lord of the Rings movies. And so, I mean, you see that and read the books. There's trillions of different books. I'm not saying trillion, but I'm just throwing out there's a lot of books he wrote. So I think there's some truth to that. And there's some truth to that. He wrote a lot of stuff, like James was saying, from the Bible. I'm not going to say this is 100% the dwarfs, but it could be probably about, like I was saying, 60-70% chance this is probably where they origin, or they're a part of the origin. We just haven't found everything. And like he said, there's secret collections everywhere. We're never going to know. People buy stuff. They have the black market. They do what they want. You know, everybody knows that. There's stuff, you can get anything in the black market. And we'll never know. Are they somebody else? Or the government's hiding it? Or, you know, we don't know what. Some government's hiding something. You know, we all know that. We don't want to get into that because they listen to everything we say. So we'll leave it at that. But somebody's hiding something. We ain't ever going to really know the truth. And like James said, there's always going to be the naysayers that don't know nothing. That the funny thing about that is the naysayers who say this, it's because they see something on TV and they believe it exactly to the T. They don't believe things exist like dwarfs and hobbits and dragons because they have never seen it. That's what it is. They've never seen it in real life, so it doesn't exist. So dinosaurs didn't exist. They have bones of them. We have proof of it. The mammoth doesn't exist. We have proof of it. So why wouldn't these things exist? I don't understand why people don't think these things exist when we already know dinosaurs did. Giant sea monsters existed. Why wouldn't these creatures exist? I believe that those bones are real. I believe that they are probably humanoid, either dwarfs or, I'm not going to say 100% impossible being alien, but I'm pretty much going to go with the dwarfs. But it doesn't mean they don't exist because people just want to argue it, or everything right off the bat is evil. That's probably going to be another thing that we're going to hear is it's evil and it's not real and it's abominations. Please do your research. Start looking up things in life. Don't always look and see what everything says on TV or on the internet or Amazon, well, not Amazon, YouTube and all that. Please make sure you know, even if it's people are saying it. Oh, I saw it on a documentary. Look who did the documentary. Research it. Study it. Find out more opinions than just one. That's with everything. Before you, whatever you believe, religious wise or anything, remember, always study every religion before you know to say anything about any other ones. But I'm saying that in general because we know we're going to have naysayers on the show because we always do on every show we do. But I totally believe that's a very big possibility that what they have uncovered was dwarves. I always leave a door open for everything. I'm optimistic, and that's just how I think. That's just my head. Unless if I seen it with my own eyes and I'm going, oh, that's 100%. But I'm going to go with James, and it's probably true. Do I believe? And like I said, I do believe these things existed. I believe there was some truth to all these stories. I just believe they just didn't care about humans anymore, and they just said let them destroy themselves. Kind of like the movie. You see that they all took off and left and let the time of the humans be. So maybe we're running out of time. Maybe there's some truth to that. Maybe they're going to come back, like the Nephilim and all that, like he was talking about. They're going to come back and retake everything over because we're on our end right now. We've had our thousands and thousands of years of running things, and maybe it's time for something else to come. I'm not saying I believe that. I'm just saying that's a theory. You ever think about that? Maybe this is our time is running out and something else is coming, and maybe we're going to go away. Maybe we'll go and maybe spaceships are going to come out of nowhere. Maybe maybe these dwarves and elves have a place like the hollow ground theory. They go in the ground, and we don't know where they're at. I'm just giving ideas and theories, guys. I always keep my mind open on everything. That's how you learn. You can't just learn something by saying one thing and only have one theory. You have to learn everybody's theory. And if you don't, then you're just going to you're going to never learn anything. And you're always going to argue with everybody and think you're right when there's so many different opinions and stuff out there to research. Just research. I'm not saying that you have to change your opinion, but check out opinions by others before you make a decision to say anything. But most people are not going to. They're going to say something like naysayers, and we deal with it to the point where it's life. It happens in media with anything, social media. It seems like every time you put an opinion in, somebody's got to give theirs or have to argue with you about it because they heard it on YouTube or Facebook or the news. And you know what? 90% of this, probably 10% of it's fact, and all the other stuff is entertainment or to start trouble or instigate things and have a different agenda. So that's why I said always look it up. Go to a library. Look it on your phone. Don't just look it up on Wikipedia or stuff like that. They're going to have just some people's opinions. Look it up. Do some research. Go on YouTube. See what you can see. Look at people who study this stuff and actually been studying it for hundreds of years and stuff like that. Even thousands. People have books. So check it out. See what you think. Check this show out. I was really interested in when James told me about it because I love dwarfs. I love elves. I love dragons. I was a big Warcraft fan. That's another thing. They have dwarfs, elves, humans. Have you ever played that game? It has all kinds of creatures like that. EverQuest, same kind of game. There's all kinds of other ones. What's the other one? It's famous. Elder Scroll. One of the most famous of them all right there. Everybody's played all those kind of games. They have different, creatures and stuff. You can be goblins. You can be humans. You can be like, God, I don't know what they're the cat people, lizard men, elves, dwarfs, all kinds of cool stuff. But I've always been interested in this. Is like one of my favorite topics. I wish I could see me and James. This is so funny. I would prefer being a night elf because that's my favorite thing. I love the elf species, And I could see James as like a monster slayer, and we're running around killing stuff. You know, if you ever seen, I love bow and arrows and swords myself, and I would probably be more of a human kind of killer, monster killer too myself. I'd probably be more dwarfish. That would more fit me because I'm just stocky like that, and I like to destroy things like that. And I could see myself sitting there fighting things along with James, killing dragons and being in the Hobbit movies. Those would be kind of cool. We've always talked about this, and it's kind of funny that we were born in the wrong era. We should have been born in this time. We'd be fighting creatures, and it would be probably really fun. You know, probably would die because that's what happens. You die on your sword, but at least we would go out the way we want to. And I think we would have been a really cool time. But that we've always joked about it. We always try to play video games with each other and stuff, especially that era. And we like all kinds of history, but we love that whole elf thing and trolls and all that stuff. And James really likes that era too, and especially in video games, he likes playing stuff like that. It has to do with that. And the movies are Lord of the Rings and stuff like that, Hobbit. Some of the best stuff I've ever seen. I love it. So there you go, James. That's my opinion.
One thing is for certain. The world used to be a very, very different place than it is now. I went through a list earlier of a lot of these quote-unquote fantasy creatures that we now know did exist. And there were others that there's a lot of evidence that would point to the fact that they possibly existed as well. So imagine a time period when the universe of Tolkien and Weiss and Hickman and the Dragonlance series and all that stuff. Imagine a world where all of that is real and is out there. When you walk outside of your home and there are dwarfs and elves and hobbits and maybe ogres and all these kind of things. It's pretty amazing. And I think that some of that, believe it or not, is, or at least was, reality. I mean, remember, there's a lot of tales of knights during medieval times that would fight dragons. Now, I'm not saying that those stories are 100% fact. But what I am saying is they're based on something. What were those dragons if they weren't real? Were they just complete stories made up? I don't believe that. Because it's such a rich and integral part of the folklore of England and that area, the Celtic area. So I don't believe that it's completely fabricated. So what was that based on? Was there an actual creature known as a dragon that existed on Earth that human beings fought against and slayed? I would say yes, because there's a lot of tales of it. Maybe that dragon was actually a dinosaur that was still around during medieval times. There's still a handful of them left, and they were causing havoc as a dinosaur would do. If you had a dinosaur hanging out by your kingdom, chances are that dinosaur is going to eat some people. And if it's a flying dinosaur like dragons were, then chances are it's going to swoop down and pick some people off, especially like the weak and the slow, and going to eat them. So I could totally see that being a possibility. And if that happened, the people would look to the king and his knights to protect them, because he was their ruler. So I could totally see the king sending his knights out to find and to slay the dragon. Makes complete sense to me. Now, was it done the way that the stories say it was done? Probably not. I'm pretty sure you didn't have one guy in armor go up and fight a dragon and win. But I could definitely see one or two guys tracking this thing, finding its lair, and then sneaking in there when the dragon's sleeping with a team of guys and some lances and stuff and killing it. I could see that happening. If I had to kill a dragon, that's how I would do it. I would have a small team of guys. I would have very large lances that were sharp as hell, made of steel or something. And I would sneak in there when the thing is asleep, and I would kill it before it woke up. I would just have everybody start stabbing the hell out of it. That is probably how it went down in real life. I doubt very seriously one guy showed up in his armor, got off his horse and yelled out, "Hey dragon, I'm out here. Come out and fight like a man." That's crazy. You wouldn't do that to a dinosaur. It would kill you. You would find a way to trap it, and you would take it down that way with a lot of you. It wouldn't just be one guy. So I think the story was definitely embellished. Let's put it that way, exaggerated. But I think that it's based in reality. And tonight we learned through this article that there was a race of dwarfs that actually lived on Earth, which is so cool. So those fantasy books, that whole genre of Dungeons and Dragons and Warcraft and Dragonlance and Tolkien and Forgotten Realms is not complete fiction. Yes, the stories are fiction, the narratives are fiction, but some of those creatures were real. Some of them actually existed, which is very, very cool. I'm glad that they don't all exist today, especially things like dragons. Although it would be quite breathtaking and quite amazing to see a dragon in person, I'm glad they're not around, because they would definitely rack up a body count. I think the dragons were one of those things that was just on a collision course with us, and we had to get rid of them because they were dangerous as hell. And that's what we do. When there's a dangerous animal, we take it out, if it's in an area we want to be. And the problem with the dragon is it can fly, so its territory can literally be hundreds of miles around. So if you have any kind of number of these things, there's just no way that you can live peacefully away from them. You have to fight. And keep in mind, when I spoke earlier about the Bible, a whole section of the Bible is devoted to King David and his battles that he fought. Remember, during that time period, they were fighting against whole armies and races of giants, where they would go in and slaughter every single one of them. They wouldn't even take prisoners, because God commanded them to kill every single one of them, because they were all abominations. And they were polluting the bloodlines. So they had to be taken out. So if you say that you're a Christian, if you believe the Bible, how can you not believe in giants? How can you not believe in unicorns? Unicorns are in the Bible. Multiple places, 2 or 3 places in the Bible, it talks about unicorns. It talks about witches. It talks about psychics. It talks about all kinds of stuff like that in the Bible. So if you are a person that is a believer in God and believe that the Bible is the Word of God, as I do, then you can't simply say these things don't exist. Because if you say that, you are saying that the Bible is not telling you the truth. And I'm not trying to accuse anybody. I'm not trying to make anybody feel bad about themselves or doubt their religion or anything like that. I myself am a Christian. I believe the Bible is the Word of God. I believe everything in it is true. Are some of the stories in the Bible pretty fantastic? Yes, they are. But that doesn't mean they're not true. The story of Noah's Ark is pretty fantastic, but we know that there was a worldwide flood. We know that mankind and 90-some% of the animals on earth all come from either a pair or a small amount of them around the exact same time period as each other. So what that means is there was some sort of cataclysm, some sort of worldwide catastrophe which caused all but a couple of every species on Earth to die. And then from those couple or small amount came all of us and all of everything that's here today. And we know that scientifically is true. I covered it on Staring and on an episode of Paranormal News, where they did a DNA study, and that was what they found, that human beings and over 90% of the species on Earth come from a single pair or a small group, all around the same exact time period. So that proves the story of Noah's Ark. Yes, it's a fantastic story. And yes, science backs it up. There's a lot of things like that in the Bible. I could go through them all if I had time. But we're running short on time here. I don't have time to go through it all. But over and over and over again, we find that to be the case. So why should any of these things be any different? If the Bible's telling you the truth about Noah's Ark, why wouldn't it be telling you the truth about unicorns, for example? And if you talk about the book of Enoch, that goes a lot deeper into the origins of all these things. On that episode we did, What are demons and where do they come from? I talked about demons, I talked about giants, I talked about vampires. I gave you the origin stories of all of those creatures. Told you where they came from, where the folklore came from, what it was based on. And I gave you examples and proved it on that episode. The world was a very different place back then. We look at things now through our modern, quote-unquote, civilized eyes, and we don't believe a lot of these tales, but I think a lot of these things did exist, and I think a lot of these things actually walked the earth with us. And if time travel is ever perfected to where we can do it, I would love to go back and see some of these things for myself. So I'm going to throw over to Old Boy again and get his shout outs and everything, and then we will wrap up.
Thank you, brother. I hope you guys all enjoyed the show. It was very interesting. I kind of believe it like he does. I believe in dwarfs. They exist. I believe in all these kind of creatures existed. They're probably going to, somebody's going to probably think we're crazy, but I really don't care. You don't pay my bills, and I'm going to sleep tonight if you care or not. I hope you guys like the show on Parax Radio every week. Tune in on Parax Radio. If you want to listen to all our new shows and old shows, go to James Hershey's YouTube page and subscribe. If you want to get any merchandise, he'll tell you where to go. Shirts, COVID masks, all kinds of cool stuff. So I hope everybody has a good night. Misfits, sugar ladies, monster hunters, demon lovers. I love you and have a great night, and blessed be.
The YouTube channel is youtube.com/James Hershey Jr. That's where everything is. That's where every episode of Staring is. We have the replays of all of them. If we do a show like we did tonight, to where we are talking about a subject matter, going through an article, and I am presenting photographs. If we do a show like that, if you go to the YouTube channel and watch the video replay of the show, you will be able to actually see the photographs that I'm talking about on the screen as I'm talking about them. I know on the radio it's not a visual medium, so you can't actually see the photographs when I'm showing them. But on the YouTube channel, you'll get to see them for yourself. So please go there, subscribe, and enjoy it. Also, is every episode of Paranormal News is on the YouTube channel. That is the other show I do where I go through paranormal articles and comment a little bit on them. Also, every episode of Tales from the Abyss, the TV show that we did, is on the channel. And it's just a ton of good stuff. There's about 500 or a little bit over 500 videos on that channel. And they're all 100% free, and they're interesting as hell. So please go subscribe and enjoy it. The link to the merchandise store will be in the description box of the videos. I used to give it out on the show, but they changed the link and it's all weird now. So the easiest way to do it, just go to the YouTube channel, go to the description box on the video, and there you have it. There's the link to the merchandise store. You can get shirts, hoodies, cups, stickers, pillows, towels, all kinds of stuff. If you like staring and you want some merch and you want to support the show, that's a great way to do it. As always, thank you guys for hanging out with us. Thanks for tuning in. I hope that you enjoyed the show. I hope that you learned something. And let me know down in the comments section what you guys think. Until I speak to you again, love many, trust few, and do harm to none. God loves you, and so do we. Bye-bye.